I had worked at the company for more than 10 years when Logan Pierce, the CEO's son, arrived like a bright new poster taped over an old wall. Everyone pretended not to stare, but we did. He walked fast, spoke fast, and smiled as if the world had already agreed with him. I am Laura Bennett, and I handled compliance and risk. My work was quiet, careful, and important in ways most people noticed only when things went wrong. Logan did not ask what I did. He only said he was here to move us into the future. At first, I hoped he would listen and learn. Instead, he talked about speed as if speed were magic. He called our controls old habits and our records extra steps. People clapped because clapping felt safer than thinking. He missed goals he had promised. Numbers slipped. Projects stalled. I saw fear form in his eyes like thin ice. He needed someone to blame. Someone steady. Someone who would not shout. He chose me. He thought I was weak because I was calm. He thought I was slow because I was careful. He thought titles ruled systems. He did not yet know that systems remember names. The changes began like small cuts no one admits are bleeding. My name quietly disappeared from meetings I had always attended. Younger staff suddenly gave orders they did not understand. My warnings were called negative thinking. Logan said we needed fresh energy and less red tape. Red tape was what kept us legal. I kept doing my work. I checked filings, renewals, signatures, and approvals. I lived in the places where rules slept until someone woke them. My job was not to be liked. My job was to keep the company from falling. Behind the noise, I saw something clear. Every important license, every regulatory filing, every sign-off on risk controls still listed my name, Laura Bennett, not because I grabbed power, because I had passed tests, earned certifications, and taken responsibility. Logan did not know this. He believed he could talk authority into new hands, but authority did not live in his speeches. It lived in outside systems that did not care whose child he was. I printed my records. I stored copies. I stayed silent, not afraid, ready. He thought I was fading. The truth was that the ground he stood on had my signature written across it. The performance plan meeting felt colder than the room. Logan closed the door like someone hiding a mess. He held a folder and spoke in soft corporate words that cut more than shouting ever could. He said I was misaligned with current direction. He said my pace was a concern. My numbers were fine. My work was clean. He needed a shield. He placed the plan in front of me as if it were a gift. It blamed me for delays his shortcuts created. It called caution resistance. It called record-keeping waste. I read every line slowly, so he had to sit in his own lies longer. Then I signed it. Logan smiled like someone who believed signing meant surrender. But a signature is also a receipt. I walked out, sat at my desk, and opened my contract. Then I opened the registry accounts where my licenses lived. I checked expiration dates, responsibility roles, and transfer rules. Everything was still tied to me. Nothing had been legally moved. He had just labeled redundant the only person allowed to keep the place compliant. I did not plan revenge. Revenge was already alive in the facts. Soon my access was reassigned. That was the word in the email. It meant removed. Dashboards I built now locked me out. New managers said they would handle it their own way. They tried to change names in systems that do not listen to wishes. The systems refused. Forms bounced back. Portals demanded exams the new people had never taken. External boards flagged missing credentials. Messages filled inboxes. Why won't this submit? Why is Laura Bennett still listed? Because the law said it must be. Logan called me into a meeting and asked why I was blocking progress. I told him I was not blocking anything. I was still the licensed officer of record. He said we would update that later. There is no later in an audit. There is only show me. I stayed late that night. I checked every control, license, and audit trail tied to my identity. I backed up copies, not to hide, to be ready. He thought power came from speaking louder. He had not yet learned that power sometimes sits quietly in lines of text under responsible signer. And mine were everywhere. The audit notice came on an ordinary afternoon. No thunder, no warning music, just a small email with large consequences. The date was fixed. The scope was wide. The tone was the firm voice of people who do not bluff. Logan laughed when he read it. He said, "We'll show them our new style." Auditors do not grade style. They measure truth. He ordered people to clean up. Clean up meant rename, delete, simplify. People obeyed out of fear, not respect. Files disappeared. Trails broke. Screens looked neater and became more dangerous. Meanwhile, junior staff came to me quietly. Forms demanded my login. Renewals refused new names. Some systems simply froze. They asked what was happening. Reality was happening. The company still stood on Laura Bennett's credentials while pretending I was already gone. Logan had removed me on the inside while the outside world still recognized only me. I went home that night and sat in silence. Not angry, not afraid, ready. He had written his story in soft lies. Audits read in hard ink, and the day of reading was coming. Audit day arrived with bright morning light that did not match the heavy mood in the building. People tried small jokes that died before they reached the end of a sentence. I sat at the long table with a notebook and calm hands. Calm is not the same as safe, but it is stronger than panic. The auditors came in quietly. No drama, no anger, just focus. They checked IDs. They checked the agenda. Then they asked the first question that mattered. Please confirm the registered responsible officer. The screen showed Laura Bennett again and again across different systems. Logan Pierce shifted in his chair and said I was in transition. The lead auditor asked for evidence of that transfer. There was none. Not one form. Not one exam. Not one approval. They turned to me and asked if I still held my licenses. I said yes. They asked if I had signed any handover. I said no. Silence spread slowly across the room like water across a floor. Everyone felt it. Logan finally began to understand that titles inside the company did not erase names written outside it. I folded my hands and waited. The truth had clocked in. It was not leaving early. The auditors did not rush. They worked like people who knew time was already on their side. They opened logs and traced approvals, line by line. Each path was a story written in clicks. Many of those stories ended with Logan Pierce's username where it did not belong. He tried to explain. He said words like innovation and agile change. The auditors were polite, but they cared only for one thing, authority. Who had it? Who did not? Who used it anyway? My name, Laura Bennett, appeared as the officer of record. His appeared on approvals he was never allowed to make. No anger showed on the auditors' faces, only clear understanding. They asked him one question that landed like a stone. Why did you remove the person of record from process oversight before legal transfer? Logan had no answer that survived more than 1 second of air. I spoke only when they asked me to explain a control. I used simple sentences. I did not add blame. Blame was already sitting in the evidence where everyone could see it. Logan looked at me then, not as someone in his way, but as someone he had depended on without knowing it. He finally saw the ground under his own feet, and it was me. By the second afternoon of the audit, the building sounded different. Phones were quieter. Chairs moved slower. Even the air felt careful, like it did not want to touch anything the wrong way. The auditors reviewed their early findings. Words like material weakness and unqualified approval were spoken calmly. Calm words can hurt more than loud ones because they do not need to prove themselves. The CEO listened without interrupting. I watched his face as truth drew lines he did not want to see. Logan Pierce kept his eyes on the table. I could almost feel the moment he stopped believing he could talk his way out. After the session, the CEO asked everyone else to leave except the two of us. He looked at Logan first. "Did you put Laura Bennett on a performance plan to protect yourself?" There was a long pause, then a quiet yes. He turned to me next and said, "Laura, I am sorry." Not a speech, not a show, just the real thing. I nodded. I was not interested in pride. I was interested in accuracy. The revenge people expected would have been loud. The real revenge was already happening. It was Logan having to sit still while facts spoke. Work changed after that meeting, fast in some ways and slow in others. Logan Pierce was moved out of control, quietly. No big announcement. No room full of claps. Just less access, fewer meetings, and finally a new title that meant learn before you lead. I was asked to help repair what had been broken. I agreed because I cared about the people who worked there, not because I owed the ones who blamed me. We rebuilt systems the right way. We restored checks. We trained staff who actually wanted to understand instead of just click. Logan came to my desk once. His voice did not sound like the one that used to echo in meetings. It was smaller but real. "I am sorry, Laura," he said. "I know," I replied. "Forgiveness is not forgetting. It is choosing not to let anger become your boss." HR canceled the performance plan. They used words like error and misapplied. I did not save the document. The record that mattered was the one the auditors had written, and it had written Laura Bennett correctly. Once the repairs were steady and the company stopped shaking, I made my own choice. Not out of fear, out of respect for myself. I resigned. The CEO did not fight it. He understood. He thanked me, and the thanks felt honest. I left clear files, clean trails, and instructions that could be followed by anyone willing to learn instead of pretend. On my last day, I walked through the lobby slower than usual. I remembered every late night I had stayed to protect a place that almost threw me away. I also remembered the audit room, the quiet power of questions, and the way truth does not hurry but always arrives. Logan Pierce watched me leave from the second floor railing. Our eyes met for a moment. There was no anger in his, only understanding that came too late to keep me, but not too late to change him. Outside, the air felt new. I had not shouted. I had not plotted. I had stood my ground, kept my records, and let the light do the rest. That was my revenge. And it was enough. My new job did not come from luck. It came from the way news moves quietly through an industry. People had heard about the audit, not the gossip version, but the real version. They knew that when systems failed, I did not. They knew that the controls I built held up even when leaders like Logan Pierce did not. The firm that hired me valued caution. They saw rules not as chains, but as guardrails that kept people alive and businesses standing. During my interview, they asked me only one question that truly mattered. When pressure came, "Laura Bennett, did you change the numbers?" "No," I said. "Good," they answered. I started with a small team that listened. They did not roll their eyes at compliance. They asked why things worked the way they did instead of trying to skip to the end. I found myself teaching again instead of defending myself. It felt like fresh air after months underground. At night, I thought less about Logan Pierce. Not because the memories vanished, but because they stopped controlling me. He had tried to bury me under a lie. The audit pulled that lie apart piece by piece. My revenge was simple. I kept my name clean. Months later, word reached me through former coworkers. The company I had left was still rebuilding trust layer by layer. Trust does not return on command. It grows only where honest work is planted again and again. They also told me about Logan Pierce. He was still there, but he was no longer the loud storm that blew through rooms. He sat in real training classes. He asked basic questions without fake confidence. He stayed late for the right reasons instead of the showy ones. Humility had arrived in his life like the audit arrived in ours. uninvited and impossible to avoid. I did not feel joy at that news. I felt closure. It meant he finally faced the truth I had always known. It meant the lesson had taken root. People asked if I would ever return. I said no, not because of anger, but because some chapters are meant to stay closed once finished. My mind was finally quiet, quiet like a room after thunder when you realize it is still standing. That was its own victory. I kept one thing from my old desk, not a certificate, not an award, a small yellow sticky note. On it, in my handwriting, were 5 words I wrote during the hardest week. Laura, do the right thing anyway. I placed that note beside my computer at my new job. It reminded me who I was when others tried to rename me. Titles change. Office doors change. Email signatures change. But the work you do when nobody is watching stays written inside you. Sometimes my younger analysts asked to hear the story about Logan Pierce. I told it simply without sharp edges. A powerful person blamed me to protect himself. An external audit arrived. Facts stood up. They always leaned in at the same part. So, Laura, how did you get revenge? I didn't, I said. The truth did. They waited for more, but that was it. The strongest answer I had. I did not break. I did not become bitter. I stayed myself until the world caught up. Once, I walked past the old building. I did not go inside. I did not need to. From the outside, it seemed smaller than I remembered. That surprised me. Fear can stretch walls in memory. Distance shrinks them again. I thought back to the day Logan Pierce handed me the performance plan. The paper shook a little in his hand. I had not noticed that before. Back then, I believed I was the one in danger. Now I understood something deeper. He had been afraid too. Afraid of failing in front of his father. Afraid of being seen as unready. Afraid that his last name would not save him. Fear made him careless. My calm saved me. I stood there on the sidewalk a moment longer, then turned away. I did not need to reopen the past to win against it. The ending was already written, and Laura Bennett had walked out of it, still whole. That was enough. Sometimes, late at night, I replayed the audit room in my mind like a story with clear parts. There was the beginning, where Logan Pierce thought speed was strength. There was the middle, where blame followed me like a shadow. And there was the ending, where simple questions filled the room like sunlight and burned the shadow away. I remembered the exact instant the lead auditor asked for proof and the silence answered first. It was not loud. It was final. In that silence lived every hour I had spent doing my job correctly while others mocked red tape. Logan had put Laura Bennett on a performance plan. The audit had put Logan Pierce in front of himself. Those are not the same thing. My revenge did not break anything. It built something. It built a bridge out of fear, lined with facts, leading to a life where I did not need anyone else to define me. I was not the villain he tried to write. I was the witness who stayed long enough for the truth to be read aloud. And that, finally, was enough. I began speaking at small workshops and classes, not as a hero, but as someone who had seen what happens when pride tries to lead without knowledge. Students often asked about rules, risk, and audits. But one question always returned. How did you stay calm when people in power attacked you, Laura? I told them the truth. I was not always calm inside. I only acted calm until my feelings caught up. Panic helps lies. Patience helps facts. I also remembered that my work mattered more than Logan Pierce's opinion of me. I explained that systems have long memories. They remember who took exams, who signed filings, who kept records clean while others rushed past them. Titles change. Credentials don't move unless the law moves them. I watched their faces as that sank in. They began to understand that power is loud, but responsibility is stronger. After each talk, I walked home lighter. My story had stopped being only something that hurt. It had become something useful. Something that warned others before they repeated Logan's mistakes. That felt like a quiet kind of justice. Not against him, against fear itself. Months later, Logan Pierce emailed me. Not pages, just a single line asking if I would meet him for coffee. I paused before answering. Old wounds deserve care, not speed. Then I said yes. We met in a small cafe far from the office. He looked different, less polish, more honesty. He did not bring speeches. He brought questions he should have asked years earlier. He asked how I kept working while on the performance plan. I said, because my work was still mine. He asked how I stayed steady in the audit room. I said, because the truth was on the table, not under it. Then, he did the hardest thing I had ever seen him do. He admitted everything without hiding. He said he had feared failing in front of his father. He believed leadership meant never asking for help. He thanked me for not trying to destroy him when I easily could have. I walked out of that cafe, knowing something important. The lesson had landed. The story had finished its work on both of us. Revenge had already happened. It had changed him, and it had changed me. I also changed in quiet ways I did not expect. For years, I had tied my identity to that company's walls. I thought leaving meant losing myself. Instead, leaving gave me back what stress had taken. I learned to rest again. Real rest. Not the kind where your body lies down while your mind keeps working all night. I read books instead of emails. I walked without checking my phone every block. I laughed easier, and it did not feel borrowed anymore. The audit was a storm, but storms clear skies. I stopped seeing myself as the woman Logan Pierce tried to push out. I started seeing myself as Laura Bennett, the woman who did not break when pushed. Those are very different things. Friends said I looked lighter. They were right. Carrying someone else's blame weighs more than people think. Setting it down feels like breathing real air after living underwater. I learned that revenge is not about watching another person fall. It is about standing up fully after someone tried to make you small. And I was finally standing. Quiet nights sometimes bring old shadows. There were evenings when doubt came back and knocked gently on my thoughts. I wondered if staying silent at first had been wrong, if I should have shouted louder or fought sooner. Then I remembered the audit room again. Bright lights, calm questions, and the simple weight of facts. My silence had not been weakness. It had been timing. If I had shouted early, people would have focused on my voice, not the evidence. Instead, the system spoke for Laura Bennett. They showed every license, every signature, every correct step taken while others cut corners. They showed the performance plan for what it truly was, a shield for Logan Pierce, not a judgment of me. That truth mattered more than any argument I might have made. So when doubt returned, I let the memory answer it. I remembered the moment Logan finally understood he had been wrong about me. Not broken, simply honest at last. That moment did not need noise. It needed light. Looking back, if I had to name the true turning point, it was not the performance plan or even the audit. It was the day I decided to trust my own work more than Logan's opinion of me. When I made that choice, fear began to shrink. I stopped trying to prove my worth and simply lived it. Each record I kept, each rule I followed, each form I finished became part of a foundation under my feet. Logan had built a tower of talk. I had built a ground of proof. When the storm came, towers fell. Ground stayed. That lesson stayed with me everywhere I went after. In new teams, new projects, new rooms with new Logans who thought speed meant strength. Now, when someone praises shortcuts and laughs at controls, I listen carefully. Not to follow them. To step back before their fall tries to pull me with it. People think my story is about revenge, but really it is about this. Standing still long enough for truth to finally catch up and stand beside you. And it did. Time softened the sharp edges of the story, but it never erased it. I did not want it erased. I wanted it remembered correctly. Not as only pain, but as proof. Proof that calm can beat noise, and records can outlast rumor. Sometimes I was invited to speak to senior leaders. The irony was clear. Once, A leader's son had tried to silence Laura Bennett. Now leaders wanted to hear from me, so they would not repeat his mistakes. I told them what they did not always enjoy hearing. If you want to know who keeps your company alive, look for the people you overlook. They often went quiet after that. Some took notes. Some stared at the table the way Logan Pierce once had. I did not mention his name. I did not need to. This was no longer about him. It was about systems, responsibility, and the quiet strength that is ignored until the day everything depends on it. I walked out of those rooms steady, the same way I had walked out of the audit room. Not lighter from revenge, stronger from survival. I crossed paths with Logan Pierce again at a conference. It was not planned. Life simply placed us in the same hallway. He saw me first, paused, then walked toward me. He no longer wore that early confidence like armor. He stood like someone who had learned the weight of real leadership. He thanked me again, not for sparing him, but for staying honest when he did not. "I am trying to become the kind of leader you were," he said. That sentence did not make me proud. It made me quiet. Growth had reached him. The story had done its work in him too. We talked briefly about work and about how the company was rebuilding. There was no drama, no sharp words, just understanding between two people who had lived through the same storm from different sides of it. When we walked away in opposite directions, I realized something important. The past no longer held my hand. It was only a chapter one had already finished reading. When I finally told my family the full story, they listened closely. They had seen my tired eyes during those months, but had never known the full weight behind them. They did not call me a hero. They did not need to. They saw me clearly as someone who refused to become smaller, just because someone powerful wanted her to shrink. I told them the part one had hidden then. I had been afraid, not of losing my job, but of losing myself if I chose lies just to survive. Fear tries to bargain with you. It whispers that maybe bending the truth would be easier. But Laura Bennett had not bent. I had stayed honest, even when it cost me sleep and peace and comfort. I had trusted that truth walks slowly, but it walks forward. And it had. My family hugged me not because I had won, but because I had remained myself. That mattered more than any title I ever held. People like to say, what goes around comes around. It sounds simple, but life is rarely simple. What came back to Logan Pierce was not only pain. It was learning. It was humility. It was the hard work of starting again without shortcuts. What came back to me was peace. Peace is the quiet reward no one can hand out, only earn. I woke up without fear pressing on my chest. I worked in a place where questions were welcomed, not punished. The audit had been the turning point, yes, but the real victory lived afterward. It lived in my decision not to live angry, not to let bitterness write the rest of my life. Revenge had already run its course. I did not need to feed it anymore. So this is the truth of my story. I, Laura Bennett, was put on a performance plan by Logan Pierce so he could save himself. I was blamed, pushed aside, and treated like a problem that needed removing. But I did not break. I kept my records clean. I kept my licenses valid. I kept my name tied to the truth. When the external audit came, it did not shout victory or scream defeat. It simply turned on the light. Under that light, Logan faced himself. Under that light, I stood exactly as I had always been. That was my revenge. Not anger, not destruction, just this. The person who tried to bury me had to watch me stand. And I am still standing.